When most people hear Carthage, they think of one thing: Rome's enemy. That reputation is accurate, but incomplete. Carthage was not only a rival state in a famous war. It was one of the most important urban and commercial systems in the ancient Mediterranean, and its history stretches far beyond the Punic Wars. Located on the eastern side of the Lake of Tunis in present-day Tunisia, Carthage occupied a position that connected maritime traffic, coastal settlements, and inland North African routes. That location made it unusually hard to ignore. Across centuries, different powers fought to control the same site because its strategic value did not disappear when governments changed. So if we treat Carthage as a single dramatic ending in 146 BCE, we miss the larger pattern. Carthage rose as a Phoenician colony, expanded into the capital of a Punic imperial network, was destroyed by Rome, rebuilt as a major Roman city, remained relevant under Byzantine rule, and then was violently contested again in the early Islamic and Crusading periods. Its story is less a straight line and more a sequence of reinventions imposed by geopolitics. Its foundation story captures this blend of myth and strategy. Tradition credits Queen Elissa, better known in later literature as Dido, as the founder. She is said to have fled Tyre and negotiated with local groups for land. In the most famous version, she is told she can have as much territory as an ox hide can cover. She cuts the hide into narrow strips and outlines a far larger boundary than expected. Whether literal history or symbolic memory, the story communicates a civic ideal: intelligence can create political space where brute power cannot. Carthage's early development supports that idea. It began within the wider Phoenician colonial world, inheriting language, maritime skill, and trading habits, but it gradually became autonomous and regionally dominant. This was not instant empire. It was cumulative growth through ports, agreements, colonies, and administrative ties. As prosperity increased, Carthage sent colonists and magistrates abroad, turning scattered influence into a governed sphere. That process mattered because it allowed Carthage to scale. It did not need to conquer every place directly in the same manner as a land empire. It could project authority through networks, and in the Mediterranean, networks were power. Commerce was the engine beneath everything. Carthage became one of the wealthiest cities of the classical world because it mastered exchange across the southwest Mediterranean. Wealth in this context was not passive accumulation, it was infrastructure. Trade financed shipbuilding, military readiness, elite diplomacy, and urban growth. It also created political leverage, because communities integrated into Carthaginian exchange systems had incentives to align with Carthaginian protection and governance. We often separate merchant activity from state power, but in antiquity the two were deeply entangled. If your economy depended on sea routes, you needed naval force to secure them. If you maintained a navy, you needed taxes, administration, and legal order. Carthage built that full cycle. Over time it transitioned from colony to capital of a Punic imperial order that coordinated territories and dependencies across key maritime zones. This is why calling Carthage merely a trading city understates it. It was a commercial military polity with institutional depth. Its strength came from flexibility. It could negotiate, co-opt, defend, and punish without always using permanent territorial occupation as its first tool. This model eventually collided with Rome's expansionist republic. The conflict was not only ideological or personal, it was structural. Both powers needed influence over overlapping strategic spaces, and each interpreted the other's growth as a threat. Rome was increasingly a land-based military machine with vast manpower capacity and a political culture that normalized prolonged war. Carthage was a maritime commercial empire whose security depended on access, alliance stability, and naval competitiveness. In peacetime these systems could coexist uneasily. Under pressure they became mutually destabilizing. The Punic Wars were therefore not random eruptions but episodes in a larger competition over who would define Mediterranean order. Popular memory centers on sensational moments, especially Hannibal's campaigns, but the deeper historical issue is endurance. Carthage could mobilize enormous resources and recover from losses, yet recurrent warfare imposed cumulative strategic exhaustion. Rome, despite severe defeats, repeatedly replaced armies and continued escalation. By the Third Punic War, Roman policy moved from containment to elimination. That shift is crucial because it marks the transition from rivalry to annihilation, where the objective is no longer victory over an opponent's army but removal of an opponent's political existence. In 146 BCE, after a siege of nearly 3 years, Rome destroyed Carthage. This became one of antiquity's most famous acts of total victory. The destruction was material, political, and symbolic at once. Materially, the city was devastated. Politically, Carthage ceased as an independent state. Symbolically, Rome demonstrated that resistance to its hegemony could end in obliteration. Later generations often treat this moment as Carthage's final chapter, but that framing reflects dramatic storytelling more than historical continuity. Places with strong geographic advantages are difficult to erase permanently. The same harbor access, regional connectivity, and logistical utility that once enriched Punic Carthage still existed after the ruins cooled. That is why historians continue debating Carthage's fall in broader terms. Was it inevitable due to Rome's demographic and military depth? Did Carthage's own strategic choices narrow its options? Or was destruction a contingent outcome shaped by a specific hardline phase in Roman policy? There is no single answer, but the event reveals a recurring ancient pattern. When one system seeks uncontested dominance, even prosperous and sophisticated rivals can become unacceptable simply because they remain capable of recovery. About a century later, Rome redeveloped the site as Roman Carthage. This was not sentimental reconstruction of a lost enemy city. It was pragmatic imperial planning. Rome recognized that the location was too valuable to leave underused. Rebuilt within Roman political and cultural frameworks, Carthage became a major center in the province of Africa and one of the significant urban hubs of the empire. Here we see a striking paradox. Rome destroyed Carthage to end a rival, then relied on Carthage's geography to strengthen Rome's own imperial system. The city's identity changed, but its function as a regional node endured. Roman Carthage had different institutions, legal structures, civic symbolism, and elite networks than Punic Carthage, yet both phases were anchored in the same strategic landscape. This continuity matters because it challenges simplistic civilizational narratives. Urban sites can be politically discontinuous and functionally continuous at the same time. In effect, Carthage demonstrates that conquest can erase sovereignty without erasing utility. For imperial powers, utility usually wins. That is why the city re-emerged not as a memory project, but as an operational center embedded in Roman administration, economy, and communication. Carthage remained important into late antiquity, including during Byzantine control. This period is often flattened in popular summaries, but it shows that the post-Roman Mediterranean was not a sudden collapse into silence. Carthage still had administrative, economic, and cultural weight, enough that competing powers treated it as a prize and a risk. In 698, after the Battle of Carthage, Umayyad forces sacked and destroyed the city to prevent Byzantine reconquest. The logic was preventive: deny the enemy a base that could restore their regional foothold. Yet even repeated devastation did not immediately end occupation. During the Muslim period, the area continued to be used, including as a fortification site, and remained relevant until later medieval transformations. In the era of the Eighth Crusade, it was seized again and inhabitants were massacred, after which Hafsid rulers chose to dismantle defenses so hostile powers could not reuse them. This cycle of build, seize, damage, and disable reveals a hard geopolitical truth. Some locations are so strategic that every regime either militarizes them or neutralizes them. Carthage repeatedly experienced both, which is one reason its history feels like multiple endings stacked together. Over the medieval centuries, regional centrality shifted toward other urban centers, especially Kairouan and later the Medina of Tunis. Carthage's decline was therefore not only the result of battlefield destruction, it was also a change in political geography. Trade routes, administrative priorities, and state structures reoriented around cities better aligned with new regional systems. Still, Carthage did not vanish as a place. Its stones were reused, its memory persisted, and its landscape remained inhabited in changing forms. By the early 20th century, the area developed into a coastal suburb of Tunis and became the municipality of Carthage in 1919. This modern administrative return of the name is significant. It shows that ancient prestige and archaeological identity retained social force long after imperial relevance had shifted elsewhere. Carthage thus survived in three ways: materially through ruins, institutionally through municipal designation, and culturally through historical imagination. Many ancient capitals disappear into abstraction. Carthage remained physically present and publicly legible, allowing each era to reinterpret what the site meant. That durability is part of why it still anchors debates about empire, memory, and the politics of historical storytelling. Modern archaeology transformed Carthage from legend into evidence, but evidence brought new controversy. The site was surveyed in 1830 by Christian Tuxen Falb, then excavated in the 19th century by Charles Ernest Buell and Alfred Louis de Lettres. Institutional attention expanded with the founding of the Carthage National Museum in 1875. In the 20th century, excavations drew broad attention, especially regarding claims of child sacrifice in ancient Carthage. This issue remains one of the most disputed in Punic studies. Some scholars interpret burial evidence as support for sacrificial practices. Others argue for alternative explanations involving infant mortality, ritual commemoration, or biased readings shaped by hostile ancient sources. The disagreement is historically important beyond the specific question itself. Carthage was described by rivals, especially Rome, whose narratives could moralize the enemy. Archaeology can challenge inherited propaganda, but it can also be pressured to confirm dramatic stories audiences already expect. So the child sacrifice debate is also about method: how to weigh texts against material remains, how to separate probability from certainty, and how to avoid turning incomplete evidence into total cultural judgments. Carthage teaches caution as much as it teaches history. UNESCO-supported excavations from 1975 to 1984, along with the site's UNESCO World Heritage status, reinforced Carthage as a global historical archive rather than a single civilization monument. At Carthage, layers from Phoenician, Punic, Roman, late antique, and medieval phases coexist in one landscape. That layered quality is exactly what makes the site so valuable for understanding long-term Mediterranean change. It allows historians to study not only rise and fall, but replacement, adaptation, and reuse. Public exhibits, including the open-air Paleo-Christian Museum, help make those transitions visible, yet they also underscore how much remains uncertain. Carthage is still an active interpretive field, not a closed case. The most useful conclusion is therefore broader than any one battle or controversy. Carthage shows how geography can outlast regimes, how victors shape memory, how cities can be destroyed without losing strategic relevance, and how historical identities are repeatedly rewritten by new powers. That is why Carthage continues to matter. It is not just the story of a city Rome ended, but the story of a place that kept returning in different political languages for more than 2,000 years. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.